So I'm here doing another tier list, and this is a tier list. As soon as I started doing tier lists, this is what I wanted to make, and I don't want to wait around, and then it turns out somebody else does this. To the best of my knowledge, nobody else has done this, but this is UFC fighters I would let babysit my kids tier list. Uh, so yeah, here are the tier lists. Go to babysitter, obviously. That's the best option. Craig Jones level, meaning second best option. We got the short notice babysitter, so not the best, not the second best, but yeah, if you typically wouldn't take them as a babysitter, but if you really like, you need a babysitter like on the day of the on that day, then yeah, short notice babysitter. Then we got the last resort, which is not the best option, but the one the worst option you're willing to take, which I think you know what that means. Anyway, without further ado, let's get into it. We're gonna go with the first person on the tier. We're gonna go with Gilbert Burns. I'm gonna go Gilbert Burns on the Craig Jones level, second best. I feel like Gilbert Burns would be a really good babysitter. I wouldn't put him on go-to babysitter just because I feel like he obviously he does speak English. He speaks English. He'd be a good babysitter and all that. But I just feel like I don't know me. I feel like me and Gilbert Burns wouldn't be super close. I feel like we wouldn't be super close. He wouldn't be my go-to babysitter by any means. Uh, so I'm gonna put him second best. You know what? Maybe no. Fuck it. I'll change my mind. I'm gonna put Gilbert Burns go-to babysitter. I feel like he'd be a solid babysitter. He'd do the job. I feel like he wouldn't trash your house. He'd be very respectful. So you know what? Fuck it. I'm going to put Gilbert Burns in go-to babysitter. Then moving on up, I mean, it's pretty obvious where this guy's going. Pat Barry is going in the Pat Barry category. I mean, I don't really think this is all alleged stuff, but I think you all know why he's in here. I would just be worried that he's going to be babysit my kids and then be walking them down the aisle in a couple of years' time. So I'm going to put Pat Barry in the Pat Barry category of babysitter, which means nada. You are not my babysitter. Then moving on up, we've got Colby Covington. I'm going to put Colby Covington in the short notice babysitter. I actually feel like Colby Covington would be a really good babysitter. I don't know. I feel like he would be very genuine around kids. He wouldn't be rude. He wouldn't be calling them a nerd or a virgin. He'd be like, "Oh, that's cool." Like he'd put on the real customer service voice. He'd put it on. Like, hey man, like, oh, that looks so cool. Like, your kids would be playing with Legos. Like, oh, that's awesome. What are you building, champ? Like, he'd do something like that. He'd put on a real nice customer service type voice. He'd be very respectful to the kids. Feel like he wouldn't trash your house or anything like that. So I'm gonna put him in the short notice babysitter. Obviously, he wouldn't be your go-to option, and he wouldn't be the second best option, but he would be an option where yeah, you'd give him a chance to babysit on the he's not the worst option in the world. Then moving on up, we've got Sean Strickland. I'm going to put Sean Strickland in the last resort category. I mean, I feel like Sean Strickland would be good around kids and everything, but he would also, there'd be a likelihood your kids might lose their fingers. I mean, I've seen a video where kids were like having a firecracker war or something, like shooting like fireworks at each other, and Sean Strickland was just filming them doing it. So I feel like he would be the reason your kid would get like a lifelong scar on their body where he'd let them do something stupid where maybe they'd break a bone, they'd scar their hand, scar their face. I feel like he'd be a one and done babysitter is probably the best way to put this. Sean Strickland's you'd let him babysit your kid once, and you're like never again. Like your kid would come up to you and they'd be saying swear words and slurs you didn't even know existed or you didn't think they would ever utter, especially at a young age. So I'm going to put Sean Strickland in the last resort category. Here's the fucking thing, you guys. Your kids would be saying that 24/7 afterwards. Moving on up, we've got Drickus Duplessis. I'm going to put him in the short notice category. You know what? I feel like Drickus Duplessis, very nice guy, don't get me wrong. But at the same time, because he's so like, he just, says whatever he wants, I feel like he is the type of guy who would just like accidentally leak it to your kids that Santa's not real. He would say something like that. He'd say something really, or if you and your wife are like going through a divorce or, like having to split up, people are like, oh, how do you kids feel about your parents splitting up? Like he would say something like that, or if the kid was rude to him, he'd just completely destroy them verbally. So I would worry about that aspect of it. I'm sure Drix Duplessis is a nice guy and everything like that, but I feel like if the kid wants to banter with Drickers, it's just in his natural ability to like come back with the most vicious insult possible, and then your kid who's traumatized for a couple of months. So I'll put him in the short notice babysitter though. I feel like he would be strict, but he'd be the strict that you need him to be. Where actually, I'll put him in second best category. I feel like he'd be very strict. He wouldn't let them get away with anything. I feel like he'd be pretty. He would be a good babysitter. Your house would be left the exact same as you left it. So that's why I'll put Drickus Duplessis in the second category. Then we got Abel Trujillo. This guy, yeah, he's going as far back as possible. If you know, you know. He got charged with some horrendous crimes. He is the worst. He is absolutely. There's nobody I would not trust with my kids less than Abel Trujillo. This is a guy who got smashed by Habib, smashed by Tony Ferguson, choked out by James Vick. And yeah, he's just an awful human being. So he's going in the Pat category for sure. Then moving on up, we've got Alexander Volkanovski in his old man attire. I'm gonna put Alexander Volkanovski in the go-to babysitter. I feel like Volk is the guy you go to 100%. You want him to look after your kids. If you can have a choice out of all these fighters, I feel like Volk is the go-to guy. I mean, he just seems like a really good father. He's always posting about like stuff he's doing with his kids. He seems like he's always taught his kids respect and manners very well. He's always, I don't know, it just seems like he's a genuine guy. And plus, he would probably like just cook while babysitting at your house, and you'd have like some extra food. He just seems like the type of guy who'd be like, oh, don't worry, I don't have to worry about food for the next couple of nights. I've cooked, and I don't know. I feel like he'd go extra. He'd go above and beyond as a babysitter. So I'm going to put Volk in the go-to babysitting category. Then moving on up, we've got Conor McGregor. I'll put him in the last resort. Yeah, no, I'm going to put him in the Pat Barry. I don't think he is as bad as these two guys. I don't think he is. Well, he hasn't done anything where they would put him on a level of these guys. It's just more the drug use, the alcohol. He would probably end up completely shit-faced at your house, and he'd invite like people over, and he'd just fuck your house up probably while you've got your kids are staying there. And I don't know, I wouldn't trust him not to create a big ruckus if he was babysitting. He'd be like, he'd do a couple of lines like, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck is this guy here? Like, he'd be talking about your kids. Who the fuck is that? Get the fuck out of here. Yeah, he'd be talking to your like 2-year-old kid. He'd be like, get the fuck out of here. Whose fucking kid are you? Like, it'd just go off. I feel like he'd have a complete and utter, like, lapse in his memory. He'd completely forget that he's babysitting. So he would just forget who your kids are. So I'll put him in the Pat Barry category. Then moving on up, we've got Yuri Prohaska. I'm going to put Yuri Prohaska in the second best category. I feel like he'd be another like Drickus where he'd teach a kid some like valuable lessons. He'd be strict. He wouldn't be like the party animal he used to be, but then he would maybe say some out of pocket shit that would, cause that would just cause your kids to be a bit traumatized. He'd be like, here you go, children, and remember, one day you will die. Like, he would say something crazy out of pocket to your like 3-year-old kid, your 4-year-old kid, or however old the kid is. He'll say something that'll live with them for the rest of their life. That you shouldn't be having. You'd be having an adult conversation with your children, probably something very dark and deep. So I'll put him in the second best category. Moving on up, we've got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I'm putting him in the go-to babysitter. How could he not? He doesn't cuss when he's with his kids. Like, I've heard Wonderboy cuss when he's on live stream and stuff like that, but he typically is very respectful. One of the most respectful fighters in UFC history. Yeah, you've got to put him in this category. He's a good guy. I can't see him being a bad babysitter. I feel like he'd be able to control your kids. He'd keep your house in good shape. So he'd be in the go-to babysitter category. Then moving on up, we've got Hanato Moicano. I would put Hanato Moicano in short notice babysitter because Money Moicano wants money. You'd teach him a lot of important lessons, It'd be like, Uncle Moicano wants money. Come here, little one. Let me teach you about the joys of capitalism. Moicano wants money, my brother. My brother, you'd call your kid my brother. Moicano wants money, my brother. Let me teach you about capitalism, my brother, and how you can get all the money. Consumer capitalism is the best thing in the world, my brother. Moicano want money. Plus, he'd be short notice. He'd want a bit of extra money as well. He would only take short notice babysitting jobs because he knows he'd get paid a little extra because of the high demand. So I'm going to put Hanato Moicano in the short notice, a babysitter option. Then moving it up, we've got Khalil Roundtree. I'm going to put Khalil Roundtree in the last resort category. Not because I don't think Khalil Roundtree wouldn't be a good babysitter, but I would just be scared that he would, maybe try and make them join a cult. That would be a worry that he is a part of an alleged cult. Allegedly, a cult type organization. And I'd just be worried he would sacrifice my children to his alleged cult. Not that it's 100% a cult, but allegedly a cult. So I'd be worried about that aspect of it. So he would be in the last resort because I'd be worried that my children would get used as sacrificial lambs, and I do not want that to happen by any means. Then moving on up, we've got John Jones. He is 100%. He's going in the Pat Barry category. I would not trust John Jones to look after my children because, he can't even look after himself. He's done some bad things while his children have been with him. So I can't imagine he's going to be on his best behavior when he's looking after my children. So, yeah, John Jones 100%. He's going in the big bad Pat Barry category. Then moving on up, we have Bilal Muhammad. I'm going to put Bilal Muhammad in the short notice babysitter. He actually, you know what? I'll put him in second best, actually. I feel like Bilal Muhammad actually seems really good around kids. He seemed very respectful of Ian Gary's son. He was very nice around him. I'll put Bilal Muhammad in the second best category. He wouldn't be my go-to choice, but I feel like he would just be very respectful, especially if you're close with Bilal. I feel like he would, he would be very respectful. He doesn't really cuss very often, so I'm sure he wouldn't be saying bad words around your kids. I don't know. I feel like he'd be a good role model for your kids, to be honest. He doesn't drink, I don't think he smokes, and he doesn't cuss. So he'd be a good choice to have around your kids, 100%. Then moving on up, we've got Francis Ngannou. I'm going to put him in the short notice babysitter option. The whole reason I've put him on this, I know he's not a UFC fighter anymore. Literally the main reason I have Francis Ngannou. I'm sorry, it's Ngannou. Francis Ngannou on this is literally the main reason. Is literally just because his nickname's the Predator, and I thought it would be funny to put him on here. Yeah, that's literally it. Yes, but yeah, I don't think he'd be on the literal Predator list. So I would put Ngannou in the Craig Jones, in the short notice babysitter tier. Then moving on up, we've got Tai Tuivasa. I'm putting Tai Tuivasa in the last resort. I feel like he'd be chill, he'd be happy and everything, but he'd also get unbelievably drunk and probably pass out, and it'd be his bedtime before your kids. Let's just be real. He'd probably raid your fridge. He'd be like, you'd give him a cheese. You say, yeah, if you're hungry, you can take some of the food from the fridge. He would take that as an invitation to eat everything in the fridge, take a couple of your beers, and pass out on your lounge while your kids are still awake and running amok, probably. So I'm going to put Tai Tuivasa in the last resort category. Then moving on up, we got Tony Ferguson. I'm going to put Tony Ferguson in the last resort category as well. I would just be worried that Tony Ferguson might go a little bit loopy and, think that there's people hiding in your walls and just demolish your house up a little bit. Plus, it's Tony. He'd probably start kicking poles and destroying your house, and he'd be concerned that you're actually a narc or an FBI agent or something weird that would happen, or you're a demon. And I feel like you'd end up destroying your house, and you'd scare the shit out of your kids and convince them that you're aliens or clones or something, and then your kids would be terrified for the next couple months and probably want to sleep in your room with you. So I'm going to put him in the last resort category. Moving on up, we've got Derek Lewis. I feel like I'm going to put Derek Lewis in the short notice babysitter category. I feel like he'd actually be a good babysitter. I feel like he would just eat food, but he would he'd be very scary to the kids. They would listen to him. He'd be able to get them to go to bed and everything like that. He'd make some jokes. He'd be funny. He'd get them to laugh, if they got scared or anything like that, he'd be able to calm them down. So I'm going to put Derek Lewis in that category. I feel like it suits him pretty well. Because I don't think he'd be a last resort guy. I don't think he'd be a horrible human being. He's got kids, you know. He's a good dude, so I'll put him in that category. Then moving on up, we've got Nate the Train. I'm going to put Nate the Train in the short notice babysitter category. Nate the Train in the USA, baby. Woo! Yeah, Nate the Train in the short notice babysitter, brother. Yay! That was more of a Bryce Mitchell, but I'll put him in this category. I feel like Nate Landwehr would actually be a pretty good babysitter, you know? I feel like he would be a bit loud and crazy and everything like that, but I feel like he would be good. I feel like he would bring a lot of energy when he first gets there. Your kids would love the energy for a bit, and then they would get really tired and fall asleep really early. So I'd put him in the short notice babysitter, but he wouldn't be your go-to option, obviously. But if you got no other options, you got to trust with Nate the Train, and then you would realize he's actually very good. And then Nate the Train goes in the second best option. So first time he'd be a short notice guy, but then after you actually have him as babysitter and you realize he's really good with getting the kids to bed and everything like that, you'd end up putting him in the Craig Jones second best category. Moving on up, we've got Legendary Polish Bauer. I'm going to put Legendary Polish Bauer in second. I could just imagine Jan Blachowicz going, yes, this is Legendary Polish babysitting, you know. This is Legendary Polish babysitting, yes. Yes, Legendary Polish Legendary Polish babysitting. It'd be like, this is Legendary Polish rope. You don't go to sleep, I hang you from it. And it'd scare the shit out of your kids. Your kids wouldn't misbehave. So I'm going to put Jan Blachowicz and the stoic Polish Chad in the second best tier. Then moving on up, we've got Michael Chandler. I'm going to put Michael Chandler in the last resort category. Now, I don't know what race my kids are going to be. I'd imagine my kids will probably be white, but you know, you never know who you end up having kids with. But I'd still be worried that he's going to try and adopt my children. So I'm going to put Michael Chandler in the last resort category. Now, maybe because my children will probably be Caucasian, maybe there's less of a chance he adopts. But you never know. Maybe Michael Chandler wants to spice things up and adopt a white kid. So I'm going to put Michael Chandler in the last resort category because I'd be scared that he'll do a good job, but then he'll fucking front kick KO me and adopt my children. You know, knock me out, use my hand to sign my signature, and then he'll have adoption of my children. So I'm going to put Michael Chandler in the last resort category. Then moving on up, we've got Benil Dariush. I'm going to put Benil Dariush in go-to babysitter. Yay! Yeah, no, actually, I'm going to put him in second best. Now, I like Benil Dariush. He's a good father. He'd be a good babysitter, but I feel like he would just preach religion to my children a little bit too much. You know, he'd try and turn them into like an Orthodox Christian, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe I become an Orthodox Christian one day, but I just wouldn't want him trying to influence my children's religious beliefs. You know, I want them to come to that understanding of what they want to be there by themselves, or I want to teach them about religion myself. Thank you, Benil Dariush. So I'm going to put Benil Dariush in the second best category. Nice guy, good babysitter, but he's not my go-to option because I want my children to, at least, if they're going to get influenced by anybody, it's going to be me, not Benil Dariush. Then we got Robert Whitaker. I'm putting him in the go-to babysitter. I mean, the guy's got fucking 6 kids. I think he's about to have his 6th child. He's got a tribe. You got to imagine the guy knows how to look after children at this point. It's like a brisk walk in the park at this point for Robert Whitaker. So going to put him in this category. Makes sense. He's a father of multiple children. I feel like you'd have to be a really good babysitter. Plus, he's a very nice guy, very happy guy. I feel like he'd be disciplined if he has to be. But he would also, it give your children, good memories. Wouldn't do anything traumatic to scare the shit out of them like some of the second best people. I feel like it would just be a trauma-free babysitting experience with Robert Whitaker. Then we got Movsar Evloev. I'm going to put Movsar Evloev in the Pat Barry category because, as we know, Movsar Evloev did marry a very young woman when he was like 20 or 19, and he said the main reason he married her because she was younger, so he could influence her a little bit more. So I'd be very worried that he would babysit my children for a while so they know who he is, and then eventually he'd be trying to walk them down the aisle as well. So I'm going to put Movsar Evloev in the Pat Barry category because I don't know. I don't like a guy who says that he married his wife because she was really young so he could influence her easier. I don't really like the idea of that guy looking after my children. Then we've got Jack Della Maddalena. I'm going to put him in second best. Craig. Oh, you know what? He's Australian. I'm just going to go to babysitter. I feel like he'd be chill. I'd be worried that if maybe I pissed him off, if I pissed him off, he'd say to my kid, "I don't even think you're Benny P, son." I'd be worried that would happen, but I'm sure I wouldn't piss him off. I'm sure he wouldn't decide to just brutally scare my children into thinking they're adopted or whatnot. So I'll put him in the go-to babysitting category. He's Australian, he's a chill dude. I feel like he'd be a good babysitter. Plus, he's got 2 kids of his own, so he looks like he's doing a good job raising the children. And then I've got Tom Aspinall. I'm gonna put Tom Aspinall. He's a great fighter. I'd love to fight him. I can't do a Tom Aspinall accent or impression, but I'll put Tom Aspinall in the go-to babysitter category. He's got like 5 children. So I'd imagine he'd be good at looking after kids. So I've got to put him in the go-to babysitter category. You've got to imagine. Surely he's got that many kids. Plus, he's a big, intimidating guy, but he's a very nice guy as well. So I feel like he'd scare your kids where they don't want to piss him off. They're terrified of misbehaving, but he's also very nice, so he wouldn't traumatize them. But anyway, this is my UFC fighters I would let babysit my kids tier. Let me know what you guys thought of it. If you would change anything or any of the tiers. Let me know what fighters you would have in what tier. And I will see you guys next time. Make sure you subscribe, click the like button, put on notifications. I'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching. Goodbye. Adios.